Ashley Gilbert, I'm so grateful that you made it over here today. I'm super excited to meet you. We probably should have started recording earlier because we were talking about some really good stuff. But Ashley is a tutor, and she came from a teaching background and now started with a side hustle and all the way into her own business. So full-time hustle now, working with kindergarten through fifth grade children. I have kids that are going to be in this stage, so I'm super excited to get into this. Ashley, how's it going today?
It's going really well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and share my experiences.
Well, let's get started. So, just so we have a groundwork, Ashley, you started with very young, like early childhood education in your professional world, passionate about children, and then somehow we're able to do that full time at work and add more work on the back end. How did you do that? Like, where did that energy come from? Is it just that passion that you have for it?
Yeah, it was a lot of passion, and a lot of teachers kind of have been conditioned, and maybe it's just more the female role that you do it for the kids. Mm-hmm. And the reason I started the business and the side hustle is because I was tired of watching the kids in my kindergarten classroom struggle, and I knew I could help them more. But with 24 kids, there was only so much I could do. If I could meet with them one-on-one, it would be a whole lot better. Mm-hmm. So I kind of did it, just powered through with this was what I wanted to do with my life, and so I was going to make it work somehow.
Okay, so you wanted to take some control,
yes.
Right? So when you're working teaching children, for good reason, there's a lot of rules that are put in place, and those rules can also be red tape when you're trying to help
yes.
a child. Tell me a little bit about your experience with that.
Yeah, and I just want to preface that by saying that schools are doing the best they can. But there was a lot of conversations in schools about how much a child needed to be struggling before they got extra help, or what they needed to be exhibiting before they got the help. And there had to be so many weeks of different kinds of interventions that had to be documented, and it was sometimes frustrating because I knew that they needed help, and I knew that they needed one-on-one help, and they weren't meeting this criteria or the next one, and that was frustrating. Mm-hmm. We needed them to get the help, and my personal thought is we know from research that the earlier they get the help, the better. So why wouldn't we be throwing all of this help at these youngest learners, building the very foundations? Why did we kind of have to go through all of this red tape? And that's what really made me feel like I know what I need to do in this. I'm taking the time to learn more about it myself. Let me go out and just give the help that I need without the school and the red tape being in the way.
So really it wasn't like the wanting to be in business necessarily. Like you just had to do that to compensate you for your time.
Absolutely. And it does sort of go back to, teachers aren't paid that much.
Oh, isn't that
and so I did need a second job. I needed another income, buying a new house and moving to a new town, and all of these different things cost money. So
it can't all be for the kids.
It can't all. I did need extra money, and I'm thinking, what can I do that I'm already good at? And I had such a crazy schedule that it would be a little bit difficult to have a hourly position because I need to be at this and I need to do this and all these different things.
Controlling that time component,
yes.
Right?
Yeah. So it was born out of the need to make a little bit of extra money, but also this is what I'm passionate about, so how can I help them in a way that's suitable?
I mean, kudos to you. Like I believe you can monetize like anything, right? But if you don't have passion behind it, like you're gonna hit some type of wall in business, and then you're gonna quit and give up. So it sounds like you have like an awesome mixture going on in your business. So as someone who you went to school to be a teacher, right? Early childhood education.
Yeah.
How many business classes do they have in that curriculum? Not too many.
Not one at all, no.
So you had to kind of go through like a similar learning process to me. I went to school, studied biology, all that fun stuff, but now I end up in business, so I have to learn all these things are completely foreign.
Yeah.
So tell me about your experience with that and some of like those early things you had to learn and maybe learn the hard way.
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to have spent the last 4 years of my teaching career in a small school. and we have really great relationships between the staff. And one of our staff members was a music teacher, and I knew she had given private piano lessons at some point. And so she was the first person I went to, and I just had the list. I'm like, what do I do? How do I do it? Where do I find spaces? And I just asked her question after question. And that was really where I first started. The second thing that I did was I took advantage of some of the free government programs for small businesses.
Okay.
And
Smart.
yeah, so I did that one, and then I did the one out of Anoka County where you go to actually meet with a person and they kind of give you some business advice. So that was really awesome to have.
Score?
Yes, sorry, Score, and I think it's about Open Door maybe.
Okay.
But that's where I started. I started with what free information.
Yeah, where's the resources?
Yes.
Like, I don't have any money coming
Yes.
in. Wow. So this is pretty similar trajectory to what I had.
Yeah.
Honestly. Keep going.
So I just went for it. It was absolutely terrifying. But I was thankful enough to have partnered my first couple kiddos with some families that I already knew them on a personal level. And so they kind of helped me to get my feet wet, and they understood that I was new at the business aspect of things. Mm-hmm. And so that was very helpful. And, you know, when I look back on where I started, there have been so many changes in my business. And it's even hard for me to believe all of that. But I really just believe that I had great setup to get started. And there was a lot of free resources that I used, but it really was just start and
you
learn.
did it. So
yes.
let's be honest. There's a lot of teachers, right? And they could all probably deserve to make a lot more money than they're making. But doing what you did, like, that's very unique. And kudos to you. 3.5 years in, just recently transitioned from side hustle to full-time hustle.
Yes.
What was your thought process in that? There's a lot of people that they have side hustles because they need additional money. What was that tipping point for you?
Yeah. So I went into this past school year, and I had this interesting dynamic here where I was working full-time, and then I would leave work and I would go work in the evenings as well. And at that point, my evenings were booked, and I had a waiting list of kids. And I absolutely hated having a wait list because my whole goal was to help these kids.
Yeah.
And they're not getting help on a wait list. And so I went into the school year thinking, okay, I'm not making enough money right now to go full-time, but I do have a wait list. So could I possibly do it? So it was a question hanging over my head for about a year. And I think a lot of teachers will understand when I say the past year or two after the pandemic have actually been the more difficult years.
Yeah, COVID kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think the year I was exhausted from working as much as I was. I was hoping to kind of make this change to get me out of, again, I had amazing support and an amazing staff around me, but just the amount of things that a classroom teacher has to do that are not even teaching related, just management. And I got to about April, and I said, I think I'm going to try to do this full time next year, and do what I love, and kind of leave those other things that were more, you have to do them to
like
the wayside.
cutting out stuff to put on a bulletin board. Like, I remember helping my mom do all that stuff.
You have to decorate your door.
Yeah. Well, because you can't be the teacher that does it. I'm sure you got an awesome door too.
Yes, it was. I might have gotten someone else to do it, so it was fabulous.
Okay, so
yes.
I mean, I'm just so incredibly impressed. So one thing I'm thinking about right now is like the concept of learning, right? So your business is teaching children how to learn. So like, I want to like get into your head a little bit. So when you think about learning as an adult, how do those things that are the building blocks, how do you see those applying to adult learning? So,
can you maybe rephrase that?
So, as a business owner,
yes.
You're learning a lot of new things, right? So you're also an adult, you're not a child who your job is to learn. Like, what are some similarities that you teach to the younger children that you see yourself like implementing as you're learning business?
Yeah. And I think this also applies a lot to like college kids who are just transitioning from being told how to learn to having to do it themselves. You have to have that drive. And I think about when I'm self-monitoring, where I think, I've got the whole day. Do I really need to get anything done? Like, can I just sit in the couch all day and watch Netflix? But I have to have that accountability of myself. And one of the things that we have to teach our kids is they have to self-monitor. When they're working, when they're reading, they have to, why am I reading this? What am I looking for? And so I think one of the things that I try to teach the kids and then also make sure their parents understand is I may be teaching them to think about their answer before they give it, but that's going to help them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
You can't just say the first thing that comes.
Yeah, impulsiveness. Yeah.
You have to stop and think. So there are kinds of things like that where I can see this, where like I'm teaching it in this reading aspect,
so
it's life.
It's almost like the thinking about how you think.
Yes.
And as an adult, it should be easier to do that than as a child. But like, I have a son he's in first grade. Like we literally talk about this stuff like on a daily basis. He's incredibly impulsive, very high energy, a lot like me. Yeah, my wife calls him Matt Jr. Mini Matt. That's
Mini
what
Matt.
it is. It's not his name. Anyway, so tell me where you see your business going now. It's full time, couple months in. Like, what are you doing to kind of build your business and continue to impact children?
So one of the things that I kind of had to, speaking of adult learning, when I went to college and I got my teaching degree, we were kind of taught to teach reading one way. And now there's this huge transition in the learning space where we're realizing that what we had been taught is not really working. Our scores say that, and it's just
got to change something.
Overwhelmingly, we have to change. And so I would say about 2.5, 3 years ago, set out on my own little side quest to figure out what are all these people talking about that I'm hearing of. And I ended up taking what was basically a grad level course. It was a 2-year program called the Letters Program. And it's, language education for teachers of reading and something like that. But it's this huge amount of evidence that came out of studying brain disorders and studying dyslexia. And so I found this passion for kids who have dyslexia. And then I started hearing things like, the research shows that 1 in 5 people have dyslexia. And I'm looking at my class of 20, 25 kids and I'm thinking, okay, that's 4 to 5 of you in every single class. And I guess I kind of came from this world where dyslexia it was more of a joke. Or I mix up my B's and my D's, so I'm dyslexic. And that's not what it is. And so
So what is dyslexia, then, as you understand it?
Okay, so dyslexia is basically your brain is wired differently. So it's not that you can't learn to read, it's that you need a specific way for your brain to fire to understand what's happening. One definition that I read that I really liked for a couple different things was, you should be able to learn this easily. Your IQ says you should be able to learn this easily, but you don't. And so we have to figure out what is that brain difference. But we know there's been so much research that people are unaware of on those brain differences. And we know exactly how to target those kids and how to teach them.
And then like rewire and create those neural connections.
Yes.
Right?
And a lot of people just don't know anything about that. And so I have kind of made this change in the last, I would say, year, where I'm trying to focus more on kids who have dyslexia.
Like
and
a niche.
Yes.
Yeah, when you think about it from a business standpoint.
Yeah. And I've recently started doing the Barton program, which is specifically made for kids who have reading struggles and dyslexia. But one of the really interesting and cool things is that what you do to teach kids who have these brain differences does not hurt any other kid. So the kids who don't have those brain differences, if you taught all the kids...
it's not like you're breaking the other kids.
No.
Oh, wow.
It's actually
so what's the downside to...
There's no downside to
But this
teaching.
isn't talked about in, like...
No. It is now. I think Minnesota
it's just
made
slower moving because there's so much...
Yes.
You have to... Oh, my God.
Absolutely. And I think maybe 2018 was when Minnesota made a law that they had to be teaching some of this in teacher education programs.
So the progress is being made, right? It's just like science happens and then everyone has to learn about it and then, okay, does this actually work? And then it can slowly become a thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Shout out to Minnesota for making progress.
Yay! So that's kind of where I'm headed is I personally want to be focusing on those kiddos who need that extra bump to really figure out how they can get past their reading struggles. My other thing that I would love to do someday, and this is a dream, is I'm not so good at math. I'm not a math person, but lots of kids also struggle with that, and I can't help them very much. So I would love.
But you want to help the
I
kids.
would love.
So she's hiring.
I would love to help all sorts of reading, science, math, writing, all of the different things. And for me, that would require growing the business quite a bit because these are just things that I'm not capable of doing. So yeah, I think those are kind of my.
I think that's pretty wise to know like where your wheelhouse
Yes.
is. Like from a business standpoint, like so many business owners can get off and try all these different things, right? Instead of like doubling and tripling down on that thing that they're really good at and then filling in those gaps in your business. So are you like full-time teaching and then managing all like the accounting and marketing and all those other parts of business that aren't the actual technical side of it? Or are you finding vendors to work with and paying them to your accounting? Like how are you handling that?
Right now it's me.
Just learning everything, getting it done?
Yes,
all right.
yes. I've recently, one of the great things about being able to work on my schedule is I have been able to join a few different chambers and women's groups, and the amount of just information that people are willing to help you with is fascinating. Mm-hmm. There are so many things I've been doing in my business that I didn't even know other people outsourced. I didn't realize there were people who did those things. And so for a very long time, I thought it's my business. I have to be doing all these things. And now I'm learning that might not always be the case. And I have a podcast, a women's business podcast that I listen to a lot. And
what's the name of it?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that.
We'll get it.
Biz Chicks.
Biz Chicks.
That's what it is. Chicks with an X.
Okay.
But she says at the beginning of every program, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I'm like, whoa, this is mind-blowing.
So, to that point, like, I know business owners, I know a lot of them, and what I see happen a lot is the control that they desire so much in their business becomes the thing that holds them back, because those things, like bookkeeping and marketing, they want control still, but they're not actually an expert at it.
Yeah.
So in order to move the needle, you have to spend an immense amount of time learning to then still be kind of not good at it still. So you put in all this effort for what result? And so I would recommend finding those things as fast as possible, just like the things you're spending your time doing.
Yeah.
And okay, I'm not going to teach math because that's not my forte. Well, maybe you should. Sounds like you shouldn't do your own accounting either.
Probably not. I think I agree with you on that one.
So, do you ever have instances where you meet adults and you can tell, like, okay, there's some type of dyslexia going on here?
So, one of the things that research has shown is that once a kiddo's in, like, 4th grade, I think it's 4 times more difficult to give them the intervention they need because they found their coping skills. Mm-hmm. They found ways to hide that they're struggling with these different things. And so by the time they're an adult, not typically, because they have become so adept at masking and covering up and memorizing that no, unless you really pay attention, you don't see it so much in adults because...
It's like a defense mechanism, really.
Absolutely. And I couldn't imagine, I was a reader. I was an advanced reader. I was reading chapter books before the rest of my class. I loved it. I still am an avid reader. I understand not everybody loves it. But for me, it just came so naturally. And I didn't like round reading and reading out loud. Mm-hmm. I certainly didn't want to use
popcorn.
Popcorn reading. But could you imagine not being able to read it and knowing that your classmates are going to laugh at you? Yeah. And having to do that for 10 years or more.
Terrifying.
That's awful. I mean, absolutely awful. And so, of course, they find ways to hide it. They don't want their peers to
kids are mean, too, because they're like, their brain's not all there. Mm-hmm. And until that all develops, like, certain parts of, like, empathy and all that, so they just don't exist. They're, like, cold-blooded killers sometimes.
Yes. And that's another thing that schools and society in general are trying to there are books about kids who have dyslexia to read, that whole classes should read, so that they understand the point of view of other kids. And there are all these wonderful resources to teach kids about kids with differences. But yeah, it's just shocking to me how well kids can hide things when they.
Well, I like I said, my son's like that age, and he's talked about different kids saying stuff. He's got longer hair, and he's called a girl or whatever, stuff like that. And like he doesn't, like he brings it up because like we're really open and we have those conversations. But for those kids that don't have that relationship with their parents, or they are embarrassed about even talking about it more, that like they have to figure out some way to cope with it in order to move forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, and if that's your every single day.
Well, and then how much of that impacts their ability to effectively learn the stuff that they're going to school for?
So we do know that, especially kids who have dyslexia, they're not dumb. A lot of them feel dumb. A lot of people will call them that. They're not. We have so many CEOs, so many high-level thinkers who have dyslexia. And it's because their brains just work differently. They are so great at creating things. They're so great at, designing and implementing these things. They just might not be the one planning it. And so if they can find their strengths and go to them, they're not going to be held back. They might struggle. There are plenty of doctors who have dyslexia. But there are enough of them who haven't found that, or don't have a support system to find their strengths and go with them. And they do just kind of flounder. And that's sad.
It is.
That they shouldn't be. We should be supporting those kids.
So what can we as parents do to help? Right? And it's not going to solve it, right? But what are the little things that the parents overall, overarchingly, can do with their kids and other kids in this sphere?
Yeah. I think it's, and it is something very misunderstood. And I think it's very important for parents and caregivers to know that it's far more, reading struggles in general are far more out there, the word has escaped me, than what we thought. And it is a brain difference. It's never going to be fixed. It's going to be figuring out how to make it through those.
Yeah, because fix indicates that there's something wrong.
Yes.
It's not necessarily that it's wrong, it's just that's how it works.
Yeah.
But so wrong is being defined as like these check boxes in development. I know we just naturally compare our kids to other kids.
Yes.
Like I see myself doing it, and they're not the same kid. It's not the same genetics, and it doesn't even make sense, but it happens. So, is there any advice you have for parents that find themselves comparing their kid to other kids? Not necessarily from a competitive standpoint, but it's just we all want to be good parents.
Oh, for sure.
We just don't necessarily know the best way to do it. So sometimes looking at those other reference points helps.
Yeah. So there are a lot of free resources online, and you can go, instead of comparing yourself to the next kid, or compare your kid to the next kid that you see, it would be much better if you did a Google search for signs of dyslexia. Dyslexia can be tested and intervened for at 5 years old. So even as a little kid, if you're noticing my kids having a little more difficulty learning their letters or remembering their sounds, it's something to talk about with your pediatrician. We know that the earlier intervention is given, the better. And so if you have concerns, use the data.
Sounds like you're saying educate yourself.
Yes. There are so many different ways for kids to learn. And we know that about 10% of kids just pick it up. They hardly even need to be taught in a classroom. Something is introduced to them and they run with it. They're good to go. They don't need subsequent practice, or they might only need a repetition 2 or 3 times.
My brother's like that.
Yep.
Annoying.
But it's so annoying to those. And I know parents look at their kids and think, why isn't my kid like that? But it's important to remember that about 80% of kids just need a little extra help. They're just not the 10% that run with it, and they're not the 5% who aren't going to get it.
Yeah, well, I think if parents would spend that time really learning their kid and who their kid is and what makes them happy. Maybe what makes them happy doesn't make Billy happy.
Yep.
So you can't drive them in that direction, because all that does, in my experience, is create barriers there.
Yeah.
So, like, just like giving a shit about your kid, kind of, and engaging in their development.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's something more parents could do better or more?
Yeah.
And then, if they aren't or they're struggling to do it, what would you recommend them attempting?
Yeah. So, and especially when you say that, and I think about it as a reading standpoint, so many parents are very concerned with, is this the level my child should be reading? Well, there's a difference between reading for fun and reading to practice. So we read to practice at school. I might send home homework to read to practice. But when I was a kid, my mom would let me check out at the library these huge books about the history of British monarchy. I couldn't read those books. I couldn't understand all the words, but I loved them. And that fueled my love for reading. And I tell a lot of parents, they say, well, my son really likes dirt bikes. Cool. Let him bring home a dirt bike magazine, and he can look at the pictures.
That's so smart.
Yes. When you're reading for fun, I don't care what level it is. Let your kid read what they want to read. And
that's so smart.
Yes, and parents are so concerned that that's going to hurt their child because they're not practicing. But there's a difference between practicing and loving reading. So I definitely say let your kids have a break from what they're expected. Let them find what they like. And then the other thing that I really encourage parents to do is there are lists upon lists on the internet that you can just Google. And instead of saying, how was your day? Find one of these free lists.
Like
and
an engaging question,
yes.
Right?
Even me as a tutor, when my kiddos come in, I have this list of 50 questions that I just got on the internet somewhere. And I'll ask different things like, who did you help today? Who asked you for help? How were you a good friend? What upset your best friend? What upset your teacher today? And we're talking about their day, but we're also like, oh, why was my teacher upset?
So you asking them that question gets them to think about that question, and now maybe it doesn't even resonate there. They maybe play it off. I know my kid does sometimes, but at some point, it resurfaces. That's so powerful.
Yeah, and it's just a way, and you said getting to know your kid more. Well, what's better than getting to know their empathy level and talking to them about their emotions or emotions they're seeing at school or how good of a friend was that person or was this a good choice? Or there are just so many ways that you can have meaningful conversations with your kid. And one of the things that I do, even as a tutor, I will say, well, teach me. You teach me. I have a kiddo who goes to immersion school. I don't know Chinese. She does. So we do our English learning for the day, and then I'm like, okay, teach me.
So on that, I think, so my son Malachi is in Chinese immersion in Excelsior, and we're planning on sending my daughter there as well. But, so one thing that I did not talk about this at all, like in the onboarding of the families, right?
Yep.
But children aren't the expert in anything, really, right? Like in the home, everything that is new, they're learning, and then slowly there's these things that they start to learn. But it's not until they're older that typically the child can teach something to an adult. So what I've seen, like, because I can't speak, read, write Mandarin, none of that stuff, but he gets to be the expert in that, in the household, and like the amount of pride and like his thought process through things, it's just like so impressive, like what he can do. But like I can see how it impacts like how he thinks about himself, and that like I love that. So from an immersion was really scary for us to commit to that, but it's like his brain doesn't even know. Like starting kindergarten, that's just like how he learns. And all we have to do as parents is we have to work a little bit harder on the reading, really. And sometimes they don't want to do it. Like I know, so I'm gonna get some personal advice here while I got you. So my son sometimes he'll read and he'll do it himself. He'll pick it up, but then there's other times it's usually when some neighbor kids are outside where like we read every day. It's not an option, and he just fights it, argues like now everything's impossible even though he's read the book before. And like, how do you handle a kid that, depending on the timing of it, is going to approach reading and how they feel about it very differently?
Yeah. So there's a couple different things. You know, in that case, it might be a choose your battle. Maybe if the neighbor kids are outside, that's not a good time to try it. Didn't work? Okay, we'll try later. One of the things is, especially with kids who are already struggling, if you are doing more of a reading for joy, reading to learn to like reading, audiobooks. Kids listening to somebody read is still reading. And especially I used to explain this with my kindergarten parents a lot. We would do the Pizza Hut Book It programs.
Oh, those are the best.
I loved that. And you can still do it. They just brought the program back a couple years ago, so parents can sign up as well. So it was 20 minutes of reading. And I would have parents say, yeah, but my kid can't read. Cool. You read to them. You put on an audiobook. That counts as reading. And if you have a kid who hates reading because they've been struggling, get them to listen to stories first. That's a great first step. A lot of things that you can do are kind of like co-reading with kids. So especially with my kiddos who are just starting to learn their smaller words, or they're just starting to learn the sight words, high frequency words, all of those things, whatever they're called at your school. I will read and then I'll stop and it's a word they can read. So they fill it in.
So you allow the learning and the teaching to kind of go hand in hand. That makes sense.
And I think so many people get stuck on the idea of, well, it's supposed to be reading for them. And it's like, yeah, but if they can't read, telling them to go read a story does
Where's
nothing.
the logic? Doesn't make sense.
It does nothing. So I always teach little kids to read the pictures. And I will actually use wordless books with some of my younger readers, and I will say, you read this book to me. And they say, well, I can't read this book. And I'm like, well, there's no words. You can. So we go through this wordless book, and they tell me the whole story. So we kind of start there. You can, tell me the whole story based on the pictures. You can do shared reading where I read a page, you read a page. You can do I read the words, and then...
So try new stuff.
Yeah. There's so many ways to read that give different entry points for kids. Whether they can read all the words, whether they can read some of the words. And a lot of parents say, I've read this book 20 times. Find a new reason to read. So you've read the book, you can read it again, but say, I want to stop when so-and-so does something. And then you are kind of getting your child to pay attention to that aspect of the story. There's just so many things you can do that are just, you're still reading it, but you're giving kids their own point where they can come in and
entry point to now have their brain engaged in learning something.
Yeah. So, and that's one of the things, the audiobooks and the comic books and the graphic novels, those are reading. And those are the things that people want to fight me about the most. They're like, no, that's not reading. Well, why do you think we do a read aloud every day in preschool and kindergarten? Because they're learning so much vocabulary, background knowledge. They're learning what it sounds like to read a story. All these really big reading words that it's just like they're learning how to read.
Even like tone, like exclamation marks.
Yes.
The English language is very difficult.
It's very difficult.
Very, very difficult.
Very difficult.
Silent things. My son asks questions. He's like, that doesn't even make sense because of this other rule. Because he's starting to put it all together. Now, I don't know if this was before we were recording or not, but you were talking about the concept of children getting rushed forward and out of the sight word stage, the three-letter words, and that's to hit these learning check boxes, right?
Yes.
So with that in particular, when do you move on? Does the kid kind of lead it past that, where they kind of got it locked down and they're ready to go?
Yeah, I have some points where I feel comfortable. So one of the things that we tend to do is, so there's CBC words, consonant, vowel, consonant, and that's kind of where kids start in kindergarten. And
dog, cat, pig,
yes, net,
stuff.
pig, rug, all of those things. And that's where they start, and they learn how to sound those words out. And one of the things that we tend to say as teachers, as parents, is a child can look at it and say, rug. Okay, they know how to read those. The goal is for them to not sound it out. The goal is for them to look at it and have their brain immediately do that, rug, and be able to read it. So there are a lot of things that I look for before I start moving a kid on to the next thing. I look for fluency. I look for so quick interjection there. So fluency is not necessarily how fast you read, it's how well you read something. And then there's also are you reading it at the appropriate speed? So a lot of people think fluency is just read as fast as you can, but that's not really what it is. So there's all these different things that I do check before I move kids on. And when you're in the school system, there is a lot of differentiation. So the teacher says, this kid needs to still work on this kid needs to still work on this. But, imagine having your 6-year-old's birthday party, and you have 20 kids there, and you have 5 of them at your table, and you have had to create something for all 20 of the other kids to do. You've got the 5 at your table. Yeah, it's so difficult, and that's why it can be so hard in schools for a teacher to really give the kids what they need. And so, yes, there are lots of different things that I look for, but it's going to sound scary. I want them to be nearly perfect with one skill before they move on to the next one. I do not want them struggling on one thing and try to introduce the next, and now they're struggling with 2 things. So that's kind of how I look at it when I look at when do I start and move kids. Mm-hmm. I look for them to have a good 95%.
You can't move it because it's March and we're supposed to be there. If it takes a little bit longer to master it, measuring success in a 6-month period doesn't make sense. Maybe over a 24-month period, the overall success sounds like would be better if the mastery happened. Okay.
And it's, when you think about it, we have some kiddos who, when they see something, and again, this is a very small percentage, they might see something and only need 2 repetitions and they're good to go. They rarely need to practice it, they just need to come back and review it. Then you have other kiddos, especially kids who have dyslexia, who can take 200 or 300 repetitions before they've mastered something. Well, if you've got them in a class together and you have to get through all of the units in your curriculum, what's going to happen to that kid who needed 200 repetitions? They get left behind. And so it really is child dependent when they move on, but it's much better to have them master something before moving on.
Well, and it sounds like, that description of the birthday party and literally nightmare for me.
Yes.
So it sounds like it's not possible for you to, as a teacher, to give every child everything that they need.
Exactly.
So it sounds like the parents have to have some level of obligation to their children's progress. And I'm not going to delegate that as an adult personally. I'm not going to delegate the potential success and growth of my child to a teacher.
Yes.
I love teachers. Honestly, there should be so many extra days off and all the other things. But, the kids are what it's about. Do you even have your own kids?
I do not.
Yeah, so, it's not like you have 6 kids and it's convenient, you're all going to school and now you get to pick them up and it all works out perfectly.
Yeah.
You're doing this just because you love that learning and you love helping kids.
Yes.
I think that's, good for you. Thank you. So let's get back to, the business side of things. I love learning. This is so incredibly engaging for me, but from a business standpoint, do you think that there's a percentage of teachers that were in a similar scenario to you that are looking for either more control or just more money? Mm-hmm. What advice would you have for those?
Yeah. So I think the first thing I would say is teachers have so many skills that can be easily transferred to the business world. Once I started looking at my business, okay, how did I manage 25 kids? Oh, here's how I can manage my business. There were so many things that crossed over. So I think teachers are well, I don't have the skill. You do. You absolutely have the skills. You do. You kept 20-some people alive, and you had indoor recess, and you did. You have the skills it takes. And I think it's very scary because as frustrating as it is to have a master's degree and not be making more money, my partner has a 2-year degree and makes way more money at his, blue-collar job than I did as a master's degree holding teacher. It's scary to still let go of that paycheck because you're okay, well,
consistency.
Yes, I might not be earning as much as I want to, but I know I'm going to earn it. And so I would say one of the things that I mentioned, I had about a year where I was sort of contemplating, and so I did spend that year saving up and making sure that I gave myself a few months worth of, I know I'm not going to be making a full-time income right away. Mm-hmm. And I need to kind of hold myself over. And that has given me the ability to feel like it's okay.
A level of comfort.
Yes. So that's another thing I would really recommend is maybe don't make it a tomorrow decision. Spend some time thinking about it, plan a little bit for it. Especially because if you're listening to this now, breaking contracts is not necessarily something you want to do. So a lot of teachers who are in it right now, they have until June before they're like, okay, I can leave without having to break my contract. So you have to June.
Planning for the Timberwolves.
Yeah. Got the time. So those are some of the things I would say. But then also, when you're a teacher, you sometimes have and it's a benefit, you can just go in your room and close the door. You don't necessarily have to deal with the people around you. You can spend your prep with the door shut doing what you need to do. When you're running a business, it's very easy to get into that mindset of, I'm just going to do what I need to do at my house. You have to get out and meet people and spread the word. And you have to take on more of a CEO level responsibility in your business than...
That's a hell of a mindset switch right there.
Yes, than just somebody else runs the school. This is my room. I go in and I close the door. So,
I would want to close my door too. I would want no one to 21 people all the time. Like,
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah. So that's something that, I've spent a good couple months sort of recovering and coming back to a place where I felt I had a whole lot of energy again. But I think going into it, I wish somebody would have been a little bit more blunt with me about, you have to sell yourself. You have no principal, you have no one out there recruiting and planning the things. You have to step up, and you're not just the teacher anymore. You are the CEO now. But again, teachers have those skills. You just have to mindset shift, and you have to recognize them in yourself.
And believe in yourself.
Yes.
So I'm a firm believer that in business, you gotta make a decision and then work your butt off to make sure that it's the right decision, right? And sometimes just putting yourself out there, you force yourself to sink or swim.
Yep.
You didn't know you were going to have success, but now you're learning how to sell yourself and do all these things. So when it comes to marketing for tutoring, I'm really interested. I assume there's some level of parents talking and that working there. What other successes have you had when it comes to selling yourself, marketing yourself?
Yeah, honestly, and I think I'm lucky or I've followed some really good advice, but I've done a lot of just existing on social media has brought me quite a few.
Tell me what you mean.
I think, when I started on Instagram, I was so nervous to make my first reel. And then I thought, I just have to do it. And I called one of my younger cousins, and I'm like, hey, can you help me with this? And now I'm a lot more comfortable at doing it. But I've heard
first
from...
time, the unknown.
Oh, gosh. It's so scary to put your face out on the internet. So I think I started from this place of, I'm going to tell parents the inside secrets. And so I would post videos of things like, maybe don't buy your books at the book fair, because teachers have to buy their own classroom library. And if you buy your books from the Scholastic news, the paper that your teacher sends home, they earn money to buy books for the classroom. But when you buy your book at the book fair, your teacher gets nothing. And so I would just share these little known things, and I would have parents like, oh, I didn't know that.
It's the inside TV.
Yes. And now I do a lot of showing the activities that I do, because I do know that a lot of parents get homework and they think we're just sitting at the table. And for me, I have, those memories of sitting at the kitchen table just crying my eyes out because my dad was like, it's math, it's easy. I'm like, but it's freaking
math. I just want to read history.
I'm crying, and I'm like, I don't know how to do that, and homework shouldn't be like that. Homework is such a divisive issue anyway. But let me post how I use, if we're doing a fill in a letter, okay, let's use stickers instead of just writing it. I do have this one video that parents were shocked, and teachers were like, yeah, that's a really good idea. So especially if you have a worksheet that has, the different problems and the different questions, and you're not necessarily showing your work, tear up the worksheet into each individual question and crumple them up and throw them.
This is great.
And kids have to run, and you can make a game, all these different games out of it. But then they have to run and, oh, you have to answer this question, so they fill in
The
that.
kids that learn with body
Yes.
engagement and moving, now
Yes.
you're, oh my gosh.
And I have had parents who are like, well, what am I supposed to do with a teacher? And I said, have a conversation with your teacher. Lots of teachers will take a picture, because they're not actually grading it, they're just saying, did you do your homework?
Mm-hmm.
So you can take a picture showing that they did, like kind of piece it back together. See, they
Put
did
it
the
in a
homework,
bag.
right? Tape it back together, have them make a copy of it, have them do the activity, and then they just transfer the answers to the full piece of paper. Like, there are so many different ways, and so I like to show parents how even just being at home doing homework can still be a not awful ongoing.
Yeah, if your kid's crying, like,
Yes.
probably try another route. I know,
Yeah.
for me, like, I learned a certain
Mm-hmm.
way, but I also have a mother in early childhood
Yep.
education who
Yeah.
taught me the best way that I learned after watching me learn.
Yes.
And now, okay, I understand these things
Yes.
about myself. So if I'm going to be successful in life, I need to work within
Yep.
that. Is that still the thread of teaching children? Like, there's like the tactile learners and like whatever. The categories have probably changed now, right?
Well, okay, so
Let's get into
that's
it.
also a little bit of an issue. I have done some research. I am not a researcher. I am not
You're
a
a
doctor.
reader, though.
I
That's
am
for
a
sure.
reader. I take what I see in front of me and I come up with a conclusion that perhaps we don't really understand, and that those different kinds aren't really.
It's not really what it is.
It's not really what it is. Not 100% positive on that. That's just what I've read a little bit about.
Uh-huh.
But we do know that kids whose brains are wired differently, and others, they do well when it's more, we call it multisensory. So instead of it being just this or just this, it's let's do something other than writing on paper. Building words with magnets or letter tiles.
Oh my god.
Getting a small bucket and making it like a sensory bucket with rice and seasonal type things, and then they have to pull things out, so they're like digging in the rice or the sand to get to the answer. Games. Just games. Turn Candyland into
Make it fun.
Yes. And so there are still those things, and we definitely need to be doing more than just working on a worksheet. But I don't know that we necessarily do like this is this kind of learner, and this is, I don't know that that's.
It's more fluid than
Yes.
the box.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a good way to put it.
I gotcha.
So back to your original question, one of the things that I have done a lot of on social media is I try to help parents as well, parents and caregivers. So it's not just, hey, you need a tutor. Hey, this is how you know you need a tutor. But
Nobody
maybe,
likes that.
No.
Anyway. You bring
That's
value
it. Yes.
to them, right?
like, let me show you what I'm doing that you can do. I love to show parents a lot of the free websites, or sometimes not even free, or apps. Like, there are so many really cool apps. Like, I will sing the praises of Khan Academy Kids forever. It is a free app, and you can have a different account for each of them.
I gotta connect you with my wife. You gotta be on her show. 'Cause she has a plat for moms to talk about a lot of the same stuff, right? She just has a different background. So that'll be an action item for me after
Awesome.
this.
I would love, because that's one thing that I would love to do is I would love to help more than just the kids, because this is more than just about the kids.
Well, but what do you mean when you say that? The parents need help
Parents,
too?
yeah.
Arguably more.
I don't know about that. I wouldn't say that, but no. Yeah, and even just to understand. I mean, parents who homeschool.
You need to start like an
families-
academy or something.
Oh gosh, I don't know about that, but that'd be fun.
Just call your social media pages.
That's what it is. But there's so many things that parents don't know simply because that's not their expertise. And I can share that easily. And I want to help parents have a better time of it, even if their child is struggling.
Yeah, because, I mean, look, parents want to be good parents. There's not a lot of parents out there that are okay with being bad at it. Like, we're all trying our best.
Yeah.
And we're working towards it, but, like, access to information, like, there's so many resources, which makes you feel like there's none.
Yes.
You don't even know where to start.
Yes.
But the power in just doing a Google search, like you said, starting somewhere, maybe that pops this podcast up, and now all of a sudden a parent identifies that, oh my gosh, my child has dyslexia. But now there's actionable steps they can take to help their kid. And I think when it comes to business like that, just doing something. You can't be helpless. Like, you can't let life happen to you. That whole concept is so important
Yes.
for success. And like parents with kids, like I've been there where like I don't know what to do with this.
Yeah.
It's like it's not in the textbook. Like
Yeah.
I can't figure out how to teach my kid this one. So like reaching out, having resources. Are there any like mom communities or anything like that you've found to engage with? Is that part of like I don't know a tactic or something you've had success with?
It's not actually, and the reason it's not is because since I don't have my own children,
And they won't let you in.
yes, so that has been one thing that I've been trying to reach out to like the local schools and the PTOs and that kind of stuff. Like, hey, can I come and just give a 10-minute talk?
Good rule.
Right? Like I teach a lot of
Facebook
kids. I have
rule?
a lot of kids if you count them all.
Okay, so I would say this is more of an argument for why you should start your own Facebook group because it could be Ashley's Academy,
Yeah.
where we teach moms different ideas on how to help their kids.
Absolutely. And I like what you said about there's so many things that you don't know where to start.
It's overwhelming.
So many choices. And so, finding a person or an organization that you trust and letting them kind of lead you, like these are your first steps, and then you have a direction to look online. Then you have somewhere you're going, and it's not just take any path you choose. That's something that I would like to offer to parents and be sort of that, okay, cool, this is what I'm hearing. I don't necessarily know that this kind of tutoring is best for you, but have you tried this? And kind of steering parents in a direction. So that's something that I'd also love to do from a business.
So how many followers do you have on Instagram? Are you like an influencer?
No. I am not an influencer. And in fact, on TikTok, I can't even go live yet because I don't have enough people on TikTok.
I am not that big a TikToker. We'll get you there. So,
great.
what are you going to do when you leave here, like today? Like, what's the rest of your day look like? Any other year, previous Ashley would be working full-time at the school now. So now you have this freedom that, like, do you have to tutor some kids later on today?
I do have some kids to tutor later on today. Today is actually like my light day, and I have probably the least amount of kids as any other day. Wednesdays are typically like church days, so a lot of people go on a schedule. So this afternoon, I'm going to go home and I'm going to eat some lunch, and so one of the things is I don't know everything. And so I just got a new kiddo that's a little bit different. And so I'm going to go do some research and going to learn about what my next steps are. And then I'll tutor this evening. And then the rest of the today is all about Christmas decorating.
Gotta love that. We've got a whole fleet of trees here for our Christmas event.
I saw them. Oh, the one that I get to read kids' storybooks.
That's right. You're going to be there. Super exciting. Which books are you going to read?
I haven't chosen yet. I have so many books that I actually have a hard time choosing what I'm going to read.
That's okay. Maybe you should ask your social media people.
Which books should I read?
What's this book?
That would be amazing. It's a good idea.
Well, Ashley, I feel like I could jam with you for a while. I love your energy. Again, shout out to you for doing what you do and having so much passion for kids. It's really inspiring for me. So thanks again, Ashley, for coming on. Looking forward to talking with you some more.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure, and I can't wait to spend more time with you guys.
How do we get a hold of you? Let's get to that one before we head out here. So if somebody's listening to this, they're a parent, and they're looking to get a hold of you. What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So the easiest way to just get a hold of me would be if you go to keepituptutoring.com, and you can schedule, you can send me an email. My consultation is just that. It is, hey, let's jump on a Zoom call or a phone call, and we're just going to talk. No pressure. Just tell me what you're seeing. I'll kind of give you my thoughts. So that's the fastest way to talk to me. If you're just interested in learning a little bit more about what I do or finding some of the things, you can find me at Keep It Up Tutoring on Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, and Facebook. So I'm all over the place.
That's good. The free stuff, though. It's all the free
It's
stuff.
all the free stuff.
Which I love. And just the activity makes it work. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of your day.
Yes, you as well.